An act of kindness. Once upon a time, a boy named David lived in a village with his uncle and aunt. His uncle and aunt also had a son named Alex. The life of David was far from idyllic. Despite being family, his uncle and aunt never treated him with the warmth and kindness one would expect. From a young age, David experienced a constant sense of neglect and indifference. His uncle, a stern and stoic man, seemed to harbor a hidden resentment towards David. He rarely acknowledged the boy's presence and seldom included him in family activities. Instead, David was often left to his own devices, feeling like an outsider in his home. "Ignorant fool!" Today he taunted him again, "Oh, get out of here." Hearing these words from his uncle's mouth, David wanted to weep, but he restrained himself and went out. Today he broke a pot by mistake. He was insulted for even a small pot. He was a serious and sensitive boy. Unfortunately, his parents died in an accident. 13-year-old David lost his senses due to this shock. David's uncle supported him temporarily, but after some time, he and his aunt started treating him worse than servants. He was sick of the daily scolding. One day he decided to leave home. He had no place to stay. His parents' house was also fraudulently taken over by his uncle. He continued to walk without any destination. While he was walking, he fainted at one place. As David laid unconscious on the side of the road, fate intervened in the form of a kind-hearted couple, Mr. and Mrs. John. A couple on their way home from a nearby town noticed David and rushed to help him. Seeing the desperate condition of the young boy, they could not turn a blind eye. With compassion in their hearts, Mr. and Mrs. John took David to their home, where they nursed him back to health. They discovered David's painful past and the mistreatment he had endured from his uncle and aunt. Determined to provide him with the love and care he deserved, they adopted David as their son. Under their nurturing care, David flourished. They enrolled him in school and encouraged his passion for learning. Mr. and Mrs. John became the loving parents that David had always longed for, fostering a sense of belonging and security in his heart. As David grew older, he developed a strong sense of justice and a desire to protect others from the injustices he had experienced. Inspired by the police officers he had seen in his community, David set his sights on becoming a police inspector. With the unwavering support of Mr. and Mrs. John, David worked diligently to overcome the challenges of his past. He excelled in his studies and physical training, earning a spot in the police academy. Throughout David's journey, Mr. and Mrs. John stood by him, providing guidance, encouragement, and unconditional love. David's dedication and determination propelled him through the ranks of the police force. Despite the hardships early in life, he emerged as a beacon of hope and inspiration for others. As a police inspector, David made it his mission to protect the vulnerable and ensure justice prevailed in his community. Mr. and Mrs. John, proud of the remarkable young man David had become, continued to support him in his career. Their home became a sanctuary for David, a place where he found solace and the familial warmth he had always craved. The journey of David from a neglected and mistreated boy to a respected police inspector showcased the transformative power of love, resilience, and the unwavering support of those who believed in him. 20 years had passed. During this time, his uncle's business completely collapsed. Alex, his only son, had been missing for weeks. The uncle and aunt tried their best but could not find their son. One day, the uncle reached the police station when his aunt insisted. "Peace be upon you, Inspector." "Hello, tell me, what is the problem?" The inspector looked at him carefully for a long time. The inspector was David himself. He was surprised to see his uncle, but he acted as a stranger. "I want you to write a missing persons report," said his uncle. And then he explained everything from beginning to end. "Do not worry. We will work on this case carefully," said David. "Yes, thank you very much." After saying this, he left. A few days later, he reached the police station again. His wife was also with him that day. We have learned from Alex's friends that he fought with a man. During the beating, he injured him and ran away. Having said this, the inspector took a deep breath, then spoke again. "The investigation is still ongoing. Do you remember if you have committed any sin in the past?" Upon hearing this from the inspector, both looked at each other in shock. When they left the police station, they kept thinking about how their orphan nephew had left home because of their cruel treatment. As soon as they came home, they both prostrated and began to cry and ask God for forgiveness. A few days later, the inspector called Alex's father. After listening to the call, he shouted happily, "Hey, dear wife. Hurry up, they found our son. The police inspector has called us." "Oh God, your favor." His wife thanked God while raising her hands. As soon as they reached the police station, both saw their son and hugged him. After some time, the inspector himself said, "We found Alex unconscious in a deserted area. We have also arrested one of his accomplices." It turned out that the person Alex fought with was a drug dealer. "Oh God. Thank you that my son is safe. Looks like you have apologized for your mistakes, and this orphan has also forgiven you." At the same time, David pointed the finger toward himself. "What?" They were both shocked to hear that the inspector was David, their nephew. Then Inspector David explained, "Due to the hateful behavior of the family, I ran away from the house. I was walking directionless. There was no shelter around me. At last, darkness fell in front of my eyes, and I was at the threshold of a house. I fell and became unconscious. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a beautiful room. Two strangers, a man and a woman, were sitting near me. They were Mr. and Mrs. John, and they were husband and wife. They decided to adopt me when they came to know about my situation. And they took care of me without any greed or cause. Then they made me their son. After that, I got a higher education and became a police inspector. Today, I am standing in front of you, Uncle." "Son David," was all that his uncle could say. The aunt was falling to the ground in shame. Both of them were very ashamed of their behavior and asked for forgiveness from David. David was kind-hearted and did not want to hurt them, and he forgave them.